Okay, I want to finish out Exodus chapter 1, verses 15 through 22. This will be pretty brief, just one major theme about the fear of God. So the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, when the Hebrew women are in childbirth, I want you to go, and if it's a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, you can let him live. But verse 17 says, the midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt told them to do. They let the boys live. And when Pharaoh summoned the midwives again, says, why is this happening? Why are you disobeying? They basically concoct this story that says the Hebrew women are very vigorous and they give birth before we can arrive. And verse 20 says, so God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. So we see the fear of the Lord, and we see the blessing of God upon the midwives' lives because they feared him. And I'll just say, one of the things that I think stood out about Abraham, remember when God said, I want you to sacrifice your son. And he was going to do it. And he says, Abraham, stop. Now I know that you fear God. So we know Abraham was a man who was willing to obey, even to the point of sacrificing his most precious possession, you could say, his son, because his heart was inclined to obey God as the most important, individual in his life. And we also think about, I think about Job. I think about Daniel. Remember, he says, I'm going to pray. It doesn't matter what laws you pass. Because of my fear of the Lord. Remember Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? They refused to bow down because of their fear of God. Said, no, we serve God. We fear him. We don't care what you do to us, but we're not bowing down. And then, of course, Solomon, at the very end of Ecclesiastes, says, this is the whole duty of man. Fear the Lord and obey his commands. Fear the Lord and obey his commands. And essentially, fear of the Lord, I think, is putting him first in your life, is making him the priority. Now, the midwives could have been disciplined, could have lost their own life if they disobeyed. But rather than a concern for their loss of life, their fear of the Lord was so great that they were willing to pay any cost. They were willing to sacrifice, anything else. And because of that, God saw that, God blessed them. We think about Abraham, God saw it, God blessed them. We think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We think about Job. You can go down the list of those who acted in a very risky situation where they could have lost something significant, including their own life, but they were willing to obey because they respected God as the absolute authority in their life. And they put his will above their own. And they sought to please him above protecting their own life or protecting their own goods. And because of that, whenever God sees that faith, whenever he sees that trust, whenever he sees that loyalty, that faithfulness, it's always rewarded in Scripture. And in this particular case, rather than losing their lives, Pharaoh let the midwives go. He accepted that justification. And it says, God gave them families of their own. But Pharaoh then gives this order. He says, take every baby boy you can find, throw him into the river. And that's eventually what's going to happen to Moses, because when he's born, he's secretly protected for 3 months before he is not thrown into the river, but he's placed into the river in a basket. And of course, we'll read about his miraculous story here in the next chapter. But perhaps just to close this brief devotional on the fear of God, Where is it that we are being tempted to step out in the fear of loss, or the loss of our own life, loss of our house, loss of our bank account, whatever it is, in the face of persecution, in the face of threats? Where are we tempted to walk in the fear of man rather than the fear of God? And all throughout Scripture, if we will fear God and we will obey him, even under the threat of something significant from our fellow man or from those over us, the authority over us, God will always reward and honor that faith, that loyalty, that faithfulness. So where are you feeling tempted because of the pressure of human pressure to fear man, and to make a decision based on the horizontal calculations rather than vertical calculations in our relationship with the Lord and what the Word says, no matter what the cost? And no one can truly do this unless you're willing to first, as Jesus says, if anyone wants to come after me, deny yourself, pick up your cross, and follow. So unless we're willing to die to ourselves, where our possessions, our life, our dreams, our desires, none of that matters. What the only thing that matters is pleasing the King. It's his will that is the primary objective of our life. Unless we can arrive at that place, we won't be willing to pay a cost or to sacrifice when persecution comes or a temptation like this takes place. We individually have to arrive at the place where our love for God is the greatest love of our life. Not self, not for a spouse, not for our children. Love for God is the primary command. It's love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. It has to be the first command. When you arrive at that position, then everything else is subservient. And that type of individual is willing to sacrifice anything for the sake of pleasing God and following his will and obeying him. But I fear that there are many, many Christians, many who proclaim the name of Christ, identify as Christians, who have never truly died to themselves. And that's why Jesus tells that parable. He says there's 4 different soils, but the two soils in between, they don't have deep roots. When the sun comes out, they're going to dry up. They're going to shrivel up. And the other one gets choked out by the thorns. So he says there are many who start the journey, but few that finish. Because to finish, you've got to have deep roots, planted in good soil, and you've got to produce a crop. You've got to produce fruit. And I think that all comes back to, have you truly laid your life down and taken up your cross, denied yourself, allowed Jesus to sit on the throne and be king? And you're willing to obey him no matter what the cost, no matter what it potentially could cost you, even if it's your own life. I'm saying, I'm willing to obey the King because I've already laid my life down. My life doesn't matter. My bank account doesn't matter. My family is not more important than Jesus. So this is a good check on our hearts and a good opportunity to examine what is it that is threatening us with human pressure, where we should be seeking what is the Lord's will, what does the Lord's word have to say, and are we willing to fear God and follow his path, no matter the threat against us and no matter the cost. All right, we'll end there and we'll pick up in chapter 2 of Exodus next time. All right, God bless.